Okay, wow. Hi, I'm Newsha. My last name, by the way, is Ghadiry, but considering that no one else could actually pronounce that, we decided to just go with the first name. Okay, now, how many of you guys have heard the noun Iran in general? Really? No one geographically knows about a country somewhere in the world called Iran. Sincerely, thank you. Someone. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. Okay. Does anybody know anything about Iran other than the fact that it's involved in a lot of nuclear drama? Cool. Yeah. Okay, cool. Does anybody have friends from Iran? Okay, yes. Thank you. Well, if not, I'm from Iran. I've been living in Australia for the past 3.5, 4 years. I've been to a few countries, but for the most part, I was born and raised in Iran. To me, Iran is home. It's the personification of what feels like home. When I talk about Iran, it makes me feel warm. It's that feeling of, I don't know, Christmas to a 3-year-old. But Iran is a paradox in itself. Iran is this beautiful country with 4 seasons a year. We've got this lovely spring with blossoms everywhere and little flying petals. That's if you're not in the city. In the city, it's only smog. But like a little outside the city, there's blossoms everywhere. We've got mountains in the middle of the cities that are snow-capped throughout the year. Anyone who comes from Tehran has tried skiing at some point because we just have snow-capped mountains basically 20 minutes out of your house. We have gorgeous autumns where the ground is covered with leaves and there's that satisfaction of just jumping from one leaf to the next and it goes crunch, 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 crunch. It's this beautiful country with beautiful people. I would say the major issue with Iran has been the fact that we have a very, very shit government. We probably have the worst of all the governments, but in specific, they've been terrorizing the nation for the past 40 years. Solid terrorizing the nation for the past 40 years. Now, that's not my story. I'm not going to go into the whole political aspect of how the government has been a bitch, basically to anyone and everyone who stepped inside the country. I'm going to talk about Iran as a perspective of a woman, foremost, and then as someone who's been raised in a Baha'i family. Now, for those of you who don't really know, Baha'i is a religion. It's a fairly new religion, and if you've ever been raised in a religious family, you know that comes with a lot of extensions. You have your certain things that you follow, and religions are done in a certain way. So, the Iranian government, like I said before, has been terrorizing the nation for the past 40 years. But if you, God forbid, belong to a religious minority like I do, then nothing is off the table. That means you can't get higher educations, you're not allowed into university. You can't have governmental jobs. You're imprisoned for no reason other than the fact that you're a Baha'i. You believe in something that's different to what they believe. It's not even that different, but there are certain things that are different. And up till approximately 19, 20 years ago, there were still people being executed for the sole fact that they were Baha'is. Now that's the environment that I was raised in. It was this impending feeling of doom. And on top of all of that, I was a girl in the Middle East. So go figure, that must have been fun. I think when I look back, we expected a lot of things to happen. It wasn't unusual for soldiers to just come rushing in and going through all of our stuff and arresting whoever they felt like it and then taking him away. We didn't look at it as, oh my God, that's a significant event. We looked at it as, oh, right, it's another Monday. For the first time, that happened to me when we had just moved to a new city. We hadn't established ourselves yet, and my dad got arrested within the first 2 weeks of being in that city. And I remember there were soldiers who came in, and at the time my grandmother was in the house, my dad wasn't. And she opened the door and actually welcomed him in. She was like, yeah, come in. What do you need? How can I help you? Like literally, that was the way we treated the soldiers, because it was just so routine. And we knew that they didn't want to be here, and they knew that we didn't do anything wrong. They were following orders, and we didn't have much of a choice. My dad was in prison for 18 months. In those 18 months, the norm is that you sit and you visit your family member in prison, and then they get released, and you there is this feeling of, well, we got past it. But I think for the first time in my life, I saw something that was very, very rare, a unicorn. It was that rare. My mother stood up and fought. She fought for my father probably harder than I've seen her fight for anything else. She made their life a living hell. He was sentenced to 5 years originally. My mom got that reduced to 18 months. At the time, that was big. That was bigger than most people can imagine. She risked going to prison, she risked being arrested, and that would basically mean that I would have been left all alone. But she defied all logic, and she got what she wanted through peaceful means. And that was my first lesson in defiance and the freedom that came along with defiance. I think my first battle was when we had recently moved back to Iran. We spent 5 years in India. I was about 16. And to go to university in Iran, you have to go through this tedious exam. It's terrible. On a yearly basis, approximately 20,000 people take part in it. And if you're not in the top certain percent, you don't get in. Or you don't get into what you want to study. So it meant everything. And people studied. I mean, I knew people who'd been studying for 3 years straight, and they still wasn't doing as good or good enough. It was an utter privilege to be able to get into the public system of university. It was not easy. That's the least I can say. I went back home after missing school for 5 years, and I decided one day that, you know what, screw it. Yeah, I know, they're not going to let me into university, but if no one tries, if every single Baha'i kid turns around and says, well, they haven't let us in university for the past 40 years, they're not going to let me in now either, no one will ever actually do anything about it. They won't have a reason to change the system, because we're all sitting back and going, well, this is how it is. I studied 18 hours a day for 15 months straight with absolutely no breaks. I don't remember having a single day out during those 15 months. And out of 20,000, I got a rank of 103. That is in the top 0.5%. I could not have been happier. With that grade, I could have gotten into, technically, I could have gotten into any university wanting to go into any field. And for me, that would have been the best university in the country that was in my hometown, and medicine. No way back out of it. I was dead set on medicine, and I knew I could do it because I knew how the ranking system worked. Every year, approximately, they took 200 people. If I fall on 107, I definitely have a chance. I applied. And as everybody had been telling me, on and on and on, I didn't get in. And it wasn't that they actually turn around and tell you, we're not going to let you in. You get a response in an email going, there is an error with your application. And then you follow it up, and then somebody tells you, oh, we'll fix the error. And then you get another email saying, oh, there is another error with your application, and then there is that error. Somebody in your 5th generations ago had this I don't know, had diabetes, so we can't let you into medicine. It was that ridiculous. But it was a solid 3 months of go and come back, and go and come back, and go and come back. And I think I can easily say those were the worst days of my life. I had not been under that much pressure ever. I had not wanted anything that badly ever. And I went and I came back, and I went and I came back. And then I realized that, yeah, maybe it's not going to happen. But that didn't mean that I'm not going to pursue my education. To me, that was a setback. That wasn't the end of the story. See, the Baha'is have not been allowed into university for the past 40 years approximately. So what they started doing is that they started their own Institute of Higher Education. It's BIHE. It's a fairly noble effort. Your range of studies is fairly limited because there are only that many people in that certain community that can teach. But it was, for us, for all of us, it was a way of saying, well, screw you. We're going to continue with our goals anyway. And we did. I studied chemistry in there. And this isn't something that I can say, oh yeah, I got a chemical engineering degree and I went along and I had a job. No, that university was not accepted across the country. I wasn't any better off actually studying chemical engineering than I was as a high school leaver because my degree meant absolutely nothing in the country. But the fact that I learned that knowledge and I defied all odds and I went and did something that I wanted to do was a big deal for me. It was a big deal for everyone around us because it meant that no matter how big the oppression was, no matter how bad somebody tried to stop me from doing something, I did it anyway. There's a sort of freedom that comes along with defying and following your own path. There's a sort of freedom that comes when you say, well, you can try your best, but you will never stop me. And I think that's the kind of freedom that's got me here today, doing my last year of science degree, getting into med school, hopefully next year, and finally following on in my path. But the fact is that had I given in, had I turned around and said, oh, well, that's how life goes, I would have never been here. I would have never thought that the box that they had set for me was too small. Now, my story is different to what most people actually experience in their day-to-day lives in Australia. But the reality and the truth of the matter remains. Any time that someone turns around and says, oh, you're a girl, or, oh, can you do that? Or, oh my God, that must be difficult. That should ring an alarm. That should tell you that, yeah, no, I'm going to do it anyway because I can do it, because I've set my mind to doing it, and because no matter how big the mountain is, I can still climb it. Thank you.